I'm John Nichols from The Nation magazine. We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the G20 summit, where leaders of the wealthiest countries in the world will gather behind closed doors in very controlled circumstances to discuss the economy, the environment, and a host of other issues. Outside of those meetings, throughout Pittsburgh, there are community events where local folks and people from around the country and around the world are speaking about the global economy and what really needs to be done. There's only a handful of people who actually bridge those gaps between outside and inside. One of them is Dr. Joseph Stiglitz. He is a former chief economist for the World Bank, but also a Nobel Prize winner for economics. Not something everybody gets. He is someone who travels in the circles of presidents and prime ministers. But today we interview him in a church in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, in an historic African-American neighborhood, where he's come to speak about the G20 not merely as this gathering of powerful leaders, but also as a place where we could begin to talk about new ideas for measuring economic growth.
Well, thank you. I think this is really an important opportunity to begin a global dialogue. The reason that the work that I've been doing with this International Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, the reason that work is so important, I think, is that in a very performance-oriented society, what we measure affects what we do. And if we measure the wrong things, we'll do the wrong things. There's I think, a genuine concern that some of our ways of measurement distort our behavior, give the wrong incentives, lead to the wrong consequences. For instance, they don't really give due attention to depletion of natural resources, degradation of the environment. They can even give us a false picture of what is going on, and then we won't be doing the right thing. Let me give you an example. In the United States, in the period 2000 to 2008, per capita income was going up. And you looked at that, you say the economy was growing. You look behind those numbers, you look at what's happening at the middle, we call it the median income. It turns out that median income adjusted for inflation in 2008 was about 4% below that in 2000. That gives you a picture of why a lot of Americans don't think things are going well.
Maybe why they're so angry.
Why they're so angry. And the reason they don't think things are going well is they haven't been going well. But the number that a lot of politicians were using, GDP, didn't capture what was really affecting most citizens in our society.
You've talked about the tyranny of the GDP, that if that is the only measure that we come back to in looking at whether a country is progressing, whether it is doing the right things, that A, we get a false measure, but B, that can really cause us to devalue commitment to public services and frankly, commitment to the well-being of the people of a country.
That's right. I mean, let me just give you one example, very important in the context of the problem of global warming, which everybody recognizes is one of the really big problems. When you have a measure that focuses on material production, then what you're going to do is produce more and more things. And as you produce more and more things, that puts at risk our planet, our environment. If we had put more value on those other things, we would have had more innovation, and we might have gone a different way in terms of how do we use the dividend that comes out of the increases in productivity that we have been the great fortune to have been the beneficiaries of.
Now, a lot of people would hear you say something like that and say, well, there's another great egghead economist, right? He's got all these wonderful ideas yelling from the sidelines. But what's significant about these ideas is that you formulated them and have developed them in the context of a commission established by French President Nicholas Sarkozy, who is going to carry some of these ideas or some of these thoughts into the G20. So this is not from the sidelines. This is something going into the thick of it.
Yeah, he made a commitment. We had a meeting a week ago Monday in Paris. This was really his initiative. And you have to ask, well, why would a president say this is important? Well, a number of reasons. One of them is that he realizes that when the statistics don't accord with what people's perceptions of reality are, they start thinking maybe government's manipulating the data. And that leads to distrust of government, distrust of statistics, distrust of our society, and a problem that's really serious in our society today. Secondly, he has to make all kinds of choices. And what he's saying is he's faced with choices that he views as perhaps fake. For instance, citizens are telling him, increase your GDP. But they're also saying, we care about the environment. Now, which is he supposed to pursue? Now, if you have the correct measure, you may be able to balance these concerns off in a coherent way. Another example, in the run-up to this rate crisis, the statistics for the United States seem to give the impression that the United States was doing very well. Many in Europe were saying they ought to be imitating the American model. But if you had understood what was really going on, you would realize that those GDP statistics were, to some extent, false. They were based on bubble prices.
They warp our impression of reality.
Very much so. 41% of all corporate profits were in the financial sector, and they were ephemeral. They disappeared. They were really a fraud, to put it in the worst way. So that was the wrong inference to make. That the American model was actually doing better, because for most citizens it wasn't doing better. But even more, it wasn't sustainable.
But that affects our politics, that affects our debate, because if someone's saying, well, our economy is doing so much better than the rest of the world, it leads to assumptions that we have to keep doing the things we're doing. We can't possibly borrow an idea from Europe or from someplace else. What you're talking about is really a radical shift if we begin to measure so many different aspects of a successful society. Now, the G20 is not going to agree to do this this week, but you're talking about opening a dialogue, beginning a process of thinking more broadly.
Exactly. The whole point of this is to open up a dialogue for us to try to decide what's important, what are our values, and are we striving for the things that we care about. To give you an example of where we made a very big mistake, we took the financial sector as a means, as an end in itself. It's supposed to be a means to an end. A well-functioning financial sector is supposed to lead to better resource allocation, better management of risk, and that leads to a more productive economy. But we lost the thread. We started thinking that a large financial sector is an end in itself. And that was, in part, a reflection of our flawed statistics. The result of that was that we had a financial sector that didn't do what it was supposed to do, and when it failed, our whole economy suffered. So, to go back to the main message, we ought to be thinking about what it was that we really care about, and trying to make sure that more of society's resources go in that direction. As a teacher, one of the things that has concerned me the most over the last 20 years is how many of our best students went into finance. In earlier years, they would have gone into medicine, helping sick people. They would have gone into research, expanding the frontiers of knowledge. But the distortions in our economy have led to distortions in our values and how we, not only do they misallocate our capital resources, they led to the wrong direction of our most important resources, which are our human resources.
And on that note, especially on the note of finding the thread and perhaps ending the distortions and getting back to a value-based economy, thank you, Dr. Stiglitz, for being in Pittsburgh, and thank you from The Nation magazine and Institute for Policy Studies.